You've probably been in an argument this week, maybe over something small, a text message, a parking spot, a tone of voice you didn't like. Your heart raced, your fists clenched just slightly without you noticing. You told yourself you were being rational, but the real answer is far stranger. That flicker of rage living inside you is older than agriculture, older than cities, older than language itself. And somewhere in your genetic memory is the echo of the very first war humans ever fought. So when did it actually happen? For a long time, the story you were told was comforting. Early humans, the story went, were too busy surviving to fight each other. Hunter-gatherers wandered in small bands. Food was scarce. Cooperation was survival. War, in this telling, was a disease of civilization. It needed cities, it needed kings, it needed grain stores worth stealing. Take away the farms, and you take away the reason to kill. That story is beautiful. It is also probably wrong. In 2012, a team of researchers led by Marta Mirazan-Lar was excavating a site on the shores of an ancient lagoon near Lake Turkana in what is now Kenya. The place is called Nataruk. What they found there would rewrite the timeline of human violence. 10,000 years ago, before farming existed anywhere on Earth, a group of hunter-gatherers died there. Not one or two, at least 27 individuals, men, women, children. Some had their hands bound before they died. One woman, likely pregnant, was found with catastrophic injuries to her skull and abdomen. Several skeletons showed the unmistakable marks of blunt force trauma, and at least one still had the tip of a weapon embedded in the bone. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a single act of rage. It was a massacre. Think about what that means. This happened before the wheel, before writing, before a single brick had ever been laid. And yet, human beings wearing nothing but hides, wielding nothing but sharpened stone, organized themselves into a group, walked toward another group of people, and killed nearly all of them. Why? The honest answer is nobody knows for certain. But the leading theory is unsettling in its simplicity: resources. 10,000 years ago, the climate around Lake Turkana was shifting. The lush lagoon that had sustained multiple hunter-gatherer bands was drying up. Fish were disappearing. Fresh water was receding. Two groups who may have once tolerated each other's presence at a distance were suddenly competing for the same shrinking patch of land. You don't need money to go to war. You don't need borders drawn on a map. You only need one thing to be scarce, and two groups who both need it. This is where the story gets more complicated, because not every anthropologist agrees that Nataruk proves humans have always been violent. Researcher Douglas Fry, who has spent decades studying nomadic foraging societies, argues that Nataruk might be an outlier, not a rule. Fry points out that most known hunter-gatherer bands throughout history show remarkably low rates of organized group conflict. Isolated killings, yes. Personal disputes, absolutely. But coordinated, planned violence between groups was rare, he argues, until humans stopped moving and started settling down. So which is it? Was Nataruk a preview of something built into you at the deepest level? Or was it a tragic exception born from a specific and desperate moment? The truth might be both. Archaeologist Lawrence Keeley, in his influential study of prehistoric warfare, examined dozens of ancient societies across the globe and found something striking. Violence didn't need agriculture to exist, but it did seem to increase sharply whenever population density increased and resources became fixed in one place. In other words, war doesn't require civilization, but civilization tends to make war more frequent, more organized, and more deadly. Picture it this way. For most of human history, if a resource ran out, your ancestors simply walked somewhere else. The world was enormous and the people in it were few. Conflict was possible, but it was rarely necessary, because there was almost always another valley, another river, another patch of forest with no one else in it. Then something changed. Populations grew, territories filled in, the empty spaces disappeared, and for the first time, walking away stopped being an option, because everywhere you walked, someone else was already standing there. That is the moment war becomes almost inevitable.
Not because humans are inherently monstrous, but because scarcity plus proximity is a formula that has never once in 10,000 years failed to produce conflict. Here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Your brain was built in that world. The nervous system reacting to your argument this week, the one that made your jaw tighten and your voice sharpen, evolved under conditions where a stranger encroaching on your resources might have meant the difference between your children eating and your children starving. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between a rival tribe at the edge of a drying lagoon and a coworker taking credit for your idea in a meeting. It fires the same ancient alarm either way. Psychologist John Tobey, who helped pioneer the field of evolutionary psychology, has argued that many of the emotional circuits driving modern conflict, tribal loyalty, dehumanization of outsiders, a hair-trigger sense of unfairness, were designed for exactly the kind of high-stakes competition that happened at places like Nataruk. The technology around you has changed beyond recognition. The wiring inside your skull barely has. So was Nataruk truly the first war? Almost certainly not. It's simply the oldest one we've found preserved well enough to read. Bones don't survive 10,000 years by default. They need the right soil, the right chemistry, the right burial conditions. For every Nataruk we've uncovered, there are likely dozens, maybe hundreds, of earlier conflicts that vanished completely, their evidence dissolved back into the earth. The real first war probably happened long before that lagoon ran dry. We simply lost the proof. What we haven't lost is the pattern: scarcity, proximity, a group defined as us and another group defined as them. That pattern shows up in Nataruk. It shows up in the earliest written accounts of war from Mesopotamia thousands of years later. And it shows up in miniature in the argument you had this week over something as small as a parking spot or a raised voice. You were not defending land, you were not fighting for water, but some ancient part of your mind doesn't fully know that. It still reacts as though the stakes are exactly as high as they were on the shores of that vanished lagoon. Understanding that doesn't excuse the reaction, but it might explain it. The tightness in your chest during conflict isn't a personal flaw, it's an inheritance, a signal fired by circuitry that once helped a small band of humans survive a drying world, now misfiring in a world of text messages and traffic and deadlines. So, the next time your heart races over something small, remember where that feeling came from. It wasn't built for the moment you're in. It was built for a shoreline in Kenya 10,000 years ago when the water ran out and two groups of people had nowhere left to walk. You've probably been in an argument this week. Now you know exactly how old that feeling really is.